We all carry secrets from our past, but some secrets can destroy innocent lives. When you buy an old house, you never really know what stories lie beneath its foundations. Claire Sterling thought she was just buying a quiet country estate for her retirement. But when little Lily, the groundskeeper's granddaughter, whispered, "The garden hides a secret," everything changed. Under an old pear tree, Claire found a rusted box with photos and documents that connected her own family to a terrible crime from 100 years ago. Now she had to make things right. But would uncovering the truth help Lily's family get back what was stolen from them? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to Thornfield Estate like a memory that refused to fade. Claire Sterling stood at the iron gates, her hand resting on the cold metal, and wondered what had possessed her to buy a house she'd only seen in photographs. At 62, after building and selling her software company, after burying Robert and learning to sleep alone in their California modern house, she'd wanted something different. Something with history. Something with roots. The estate agent had warned her it needed work. That was an understatement. A Victorian mansion rose from overgrown gardens, like a grand dame who'd forgotten to tend to her appearance. Ivy strangled the eastern wall, and several windows stared blindly where shutters had fallen away. But there was something about the bones of the place, something in the way the morning light caught the old glass that whispered of better days. Mrs. Sterling? She turned to find a man approaching from the gardens. He was perhaps 70, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent his life outdoors. His clothes were worn but clean, and he removed his cap as he neared. "I'm Thomas Hartley," he said, extending a calloused hand. "The groundskeeper. The agency said you'd be arriving today. Please, call me Claire." She shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "I didn't realize there was still staff." "Just me. I'm afraid." Thomas glanced back at the wilderness that had once been formal gardens. "Been looking after the place best I can, but it's a lot for one person. My family's been here 3 generations. My grandmother was a housemaid when the Bellwethers owned it." "The Bellwethers?" "The original family. Built the place in 1875. He paused, something flickering across his face. "Course, that was a long time ago." Claire followed him up the gravel drive, her suitcases rolling behind her. The front door was massive, carved oak that groaned as Thomas pushed it open. The entrance hall took her breath away. Despite the dust and neglect, the space soared upward to a coffered ceiling. A chandelier hung like a crystal spider web, and a grand staircase curved up to the second floor. "The bones are good," Thomas said, watching her reaction. "Just need some love." They toured the ground floor. The drawing room still held furniture covered in sheets, ghostly shapes in the dim light. The library smelled of leather and old paper, its shelves reaching to the ceiling. In the dining room, portraits lined the walls, stern-faced men and women who seemed to judge her presence. "Those are the Bellwethers," Thomas said, following her gaze. "And some of the Sterlings who came after." Claire paused. "Sterling? Like my name? Common enough name?" Thomas said quickly. "The Sterling family bought the place in the 20s. Held it till about 15 years ago. The kitchen was the warmest room, clearly where Thomas spent his time. A kettle sat on the old Aga stove, and the wooden table showed the marks of daily use. Through the window, Claire could see a small figure in the garden. "That's Lily," Thomas said, pride softening his voice. "My granddaughter. She stays with me some days after school. Her parents work in town. Hope that's all right." "Of course." Claire watched the girl, who appeared to be about 9, kneeling by a flower bed with a sketch pad. "Does she like to draw?" "Never without that book. She's got an imagination, that one. Sometimes I think she knows this place better than I do." He poured hot water into a teapot. She's been going on about the new owner coming. Been drawing pictures of what she thinks you'll look like. They took their tea into the small sitting room off the kitchen. It was cozy, clearly Thomas's domain, with gardening books and seed catalogs stacked on every surface. Tell me about the gardens, Claire said. Thomas's face lit up. Now there's a proper subject. 10 acres, all told. There's the formal gardens near the house, or what's left of them. The rose garden's still producing, though it needs pruning. There's an herb garden that my grandmother started, and the old orchard at the back. Apple trees, pears, some plum. Most still bear fruit. It must be overwhelming, maintaining all this alone. I manage what I can. Focus on the areas near the house. Keep the paths clear. The rest, he shrugged. Nature's taking it back, bit by bit. Through the window, Lily had moved closer to the house. She was a slight child with dark hair escaping from braids, her school uniform smudged with dirt. She glanced up, caught sight of him watching, and quickly looked away. She's shy, Thomas said, but curious as a cat. I've told her not to bother you. She's no bother. I'd be happy to meet her. That evening, Claire ate her first dinner in the formal dining room. She'd insisted Thomas and Lily join her, despite his protests about propriety. The room seemed less imposing with their presence, though Lily spent most of the meal stealing glances at her between bites. Do you like the house? The girl finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I do, Claire replied. It has character. It has stories, Lily said, then caught her grandfather's warning look and returned to her shepherd's pie. After they'd gone, Claire explored the upper floors. The master bedroom was enormous, with windows overlooking the gardens. She stood there as darkness fell, watching lights appear in the cottage where Thomas and Lily had headed. Somewhere in the gardens, an owl called. She'd come here seeking peace, a place to start over after loss. But as she unpacked in the lamplight, hanging Robert's photo on the dresser, she wondered what stories these walls held. What had Thomas meant about the Sterlings buying the place? Was it coincidence, her sharing the name? Outside, wind moved through the trees with a sound like whispered secrets. Claire pulled the curtains closed and prepared for her first night at Thornfield, unaware that she was already being woven into its long history. The next morning brought rain, soft and persistent, turning the gardens into a watercolor painting. Claire found Lily on the covered porch, hunched over her sketchbook, completely absorbed. The child's pencil moved in quick, sure strokes. May I see? Claire asked gently. Lily, startled, then slowly turned the book. The drawing showed the old pear tree at the far end of the orchard, but there was something unsettling about it. A shadowy figure stood beneath its branches, face turned away. It's beautiful, Claire said. You're very talented. Is that someone you know? The sad lady. Lily's voice was matter of fact. She's always there? Always? In the stories? Lily flipped through pages. Every few drawings, the same figure appeared by the rose garden, at an upstairs window, walking the garden. Paths. Always turned away, always alone. Thomas appeared with a wheelbarrow of tools. Lily, don't bother Mrs. Sterling with your tailies. I'm not bothered at all, Claire said. I'd love to hear the stories. Thomas set down the wheelbarrow with a sigh. My grandmother used to tell them. Said they were true, but he shrugged. You know how stories grow in the telling. Please, Claire said. I'm curious about the house's history. Lily needed no more encouragement. Great-great-grandmother Rose worked here when she was young. She said the sad lady lived here once, and she was kind and beautiful. But something terrible happened, and she went away and never came back. But sometimes, if you're very quiet in the gardens, you can still feel her watching. Lily, Thomas warned. It's just stories, Grandpa, like fairy tales. But the child's eyes were serious as she looked at Claire. Great-great-grandmother said, "The lady left something behind, something important, hidden where only the garden knows." Claire felt an odd chill. Did she say what it was? Lily shook her head. Just that someday someone would find it and make things right. Thomas cleared his throat. Right then. "How about I show you the gardens properly, Mrs. Sterling?" Rain's letting up. They spent the morning touring the grounds. Thomas's knowledge was encyclopedic. He knew every plant, every tree, their histories and peculiarities. The rose garden still held dozens of varieties, though they'd grown wild and tangled. "This one here," he said, touching a pale pink climber, "this is Margaret's. Blush. Bred right here on the estate in 1920. You won't find it anywhere else. Margaret Bellwether, the last of the family to live here." He moved on quickly. "Now these David Austin roses, they're newer, planted in the 80s. Lily trailed behind them, occasionally stopping to draw. Claire noticed she paid particular attention to certain spots: a bench by the pond, a statue of a grieving angel, the old pear tree that seemed to fascinate her. The herb garden was a revelation. Despite the neglect, it thrived. Rosemary had grown into massive bushes, lavender sprawled in purple drifts, and thyme carpeted the pathways. "My grandmother started this," Thomas said with pride. "Said the lady of the house asked her to. Wanted. A healing garden," she said. "Herbs for remedies, flowers for the soul." They ended at the orchard. The fruit trees were gnarled with age, but still productive. The pear tree from Lily's drawing stood at the far end, its trunk twisted and hollow on one side. "That's the oldest tree on the property," Thomas said. "Must be 150 years at least. Still bears fruit, though. Lily loves those pears." The child had wandered over to the tree, placing her small hand on its bark. She looked back at them with those serious eyes. "She's waiting," Lily said softly. That evening, Claire couldn't stop thinking about the stories. She found herself in the library, searching for any records of the house's history. There were ledgers, accounts, but personal documents were scarce. In a bottom drawer, she discovered a photograph album. The black and white images showed the house in its prime, gardens manicured, windows gleaming, and people in 1920s dress posed on the lawns. One photo caught her attention: a young woman in a pale dress standing by the pear tree. Her face was beautiful but sad, and there was something about her posture that spoke of deep unhappiness. On the back, in faded ink, Margaret, summer 1924. Claire carried the album to the kitchen, where Thomas was finishing his day. "Is this her? Margaret Bellwether?" Thomas studied the photo, his expression unreadable. "Aye, that's her. My grandmother took some of these photos. She had one of those box cameras." "What happened to her?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "The story goes that she fell in love with someone her family didn't approve of. There was a scandal of some sort. One day she was here, the next she was gone. The family said she'd gone abroad, but my grandmother never believed it." "Why not?" "Because she helped Miss Margaret pack her things that night. Said she was frightened. Kept talking about protecting something precious. Asked my grandmother to remember the pear tree. Made her promise." He rubbed his face. "Next morning she was gone, and the family acted like she'd never existed. Took her portraits down, removed her name from everything. Within a year, the estate was sold." "To the Sterlings?" "Aye." Thomas stood abruptly. "Well, it's getting late. Come on, Lily. Time to go home." As they left, Lily pressed something into Claire's hand. It was a drawing of the pear tree, but this time the sad lady faced forward. Her face was kind but urgent, and beneath the tree, Lily had drawn an X, like on a treasure map. That night, Claire stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the garden silvered by moonlight. The pear tree was just visible at the edge of the orchard, a dark shape against the sky. She found herself thinking of Margaret Bellwether, of love and loss and secrets buried deep. Tomorrow, she decided she would look more closely at that old tree. It was probably nothing, just a child's imagination fed by family stories. But something about Lily's quiet certainty, about Thomas's careful evasions, made her wonder what exactly was waiting to be found in these gardens. And why did she feel with growing certainty that she was meant to be the one to find it? Sleep came fitfully that night. Claire dreamed of gardens overgrown and wild, of a woman in a pale dress moving through the shadows, always just out of sight. She heard whispers in the wind, urgent and unintelligible, and woke with her heart racing as dawn crept across the sky. The morning was crisp and clear, one of those perfect autumn days when the air seems to shimmer with possibility. Claire dressed quickly and made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, Thomas not yet arrived for the day. She made herself tea and stood at the kitchen window, looking out toward the orchard. The pear tree stood like a sentinel at the garden's edge, its twisted trunk dark against the morning light. The drawing Lily had given her lay on the table, that simple X beneath the tree roots seeming to pulse with significance. This is foolish, she told herself. She was a rational woman, a former CEO who dealt in facts and figures, not fairy tales and childhood imaginings. But something pulled her toward that tree, something beyond logic or reason. She found herself walking through the gardens, her shoes darkening with dew. The world seemed to hold its breath as she approached the orchard. Even the birds had gone. Quiet, as if waiting to see what would happen next. The pear tree was even more impressive up close. Its trunk was massive, scarred by time and weather. The hollow Thomas had mentioned was large enough for a child to hide in, its edges smooth as if worn by touching hands. "You king." Claire spun around. Lily stood behind her, still in her school uniform but carrying a small garden spade. "Lily, you startled me. Shouldn't you be at school? Teacher training day." The child held the spade. "I thought you might need this." "For what?" Lily just looked at her with those knowing eyes. "For what's waiting." Claire took the spade, its weight reassuring in her hands. This was absurd. She was about to dig up someone's garden, based on a child's fantasy. But Lily had already knelt by the tree, her small hands brushing away years of fallen leaves and debris. "Here," she said, pointing to a spot where the roots created a natural hollow. "This is where she says to look." She, the sad lady. In my dreams. A chill ran down Claire's spine, but she found herself kneeling beside the child. The earth was soft here, protected by the tree's canopy. The spade bit easily into the soil. They dug in companionable silence, Lily using her hands to move the loosened earth. 6 inches down, 8, 10. Claire was about to suggest they stop when the spade hit something that wasn't stone or root-metal. They worked more carefully now, brushing away soil like archaeologists at a dig. Slowly, the outline of a box emerged. It was about the size of a shoebox, wrapped in what had once been oilcloth, now rotted and falling apart. Claire lifted it out with trembling hands. The metal was rusted but intact, secured with a simple latch that had long since corroded. She worked it open, her heart pounding. Inside, wrapped in what remained of a silk scarf, were treasures from another time. Photographs, edges yellowed, but images still clear. Documents folded and refolded. And in a small velvet box, a gold locket on a delicate chain. Claire picked up the photographs first. They showed Margaret Bellwether, but not the sad, formal woman from the album. Here she was laughing, her hair loose, her eyes bright with joy. In several photos, she was with a young man handsome in a rough way, clearly not of her social class. In one, Margaret held a baby, her face radiant with motherhood. The documents were harder to read, damaged by time and moisture. But Claire could make out enough. A birth certificate for a baby girl named Rose. Rose Bellwether, mother Margaret, father unknown. and beneath it, a property deed for Thornfield Estate, dated 1924, leaving everything to my daughter Rose and her descendants, in perpetuity. Mrs. Sterling, Lily? They looked up to find Thomas approaching, his face creased with concern. He stopped short when he saw what they'd unearthed, the color draining from his weathered cheeks. "Dear God," he whispered, "you found it. You knew?" Claire asked. Thomas sank down beside them, his legs seemingly unable to hold him. Not knew. Suspected. Hoped, maybe. He reached out with shaking hands to touch the photographs. "My grandmother told me stories, but I never quite believed." Claire opened the locket. Inside were two tiny photographs, Margaret on one side, the baby on the other. But it was the back of the locket that made her gasp. Engraved in delicate script were the words, "For Rose, my heart, my hope. May truth protect you when I cannot. Mother." "Rose was your grandmother," Claire said to Thomas. It wasn't a question. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. She never knew for certain. Her mother, the woman who raised her, was Margaret's maid. Told her she was an orphan taken in out of charity. But there were always whispers, always stories, and the way the Sterling family treated us. Generations of groundskeepers, but never more. Always watching, always suspicious. The Sterling family, Claire repeated, ice in her veins. They bought the estate in 1925? Just after Miss Margaret disappeared. Bought it for a fraction of its worth, my grandmother said. The Bellwether family claimed Margaret had run off with a fortune in jewelry, left debts. They were forced to sell. Thomas picked up the deed with shaking hands. But this says different. Claire studied the deed more closely. It was properly witnessed and notarized. Legal, which meant the sale to the Sterling family had been fraudulent. Which meant the estate belongs to you, she said quietly. To your family. It always has. Lily had been quiet through all this, but now she smiled, a brilliant, transformative smile. "I told you she was waiting," she said simply. Waiting for someone to make it right. They gathered everything carefully, reverently. As they walked back to the house, Thomas carrying the box like the treasure it was, Claire's mind raced. The Sterling family. Her family? The coincidence of names seemed too much to ignore, now down in the kitchen. They spread the contents on the table. In better light, more details emerged. One photograph showed Margaret with an older couple, her parents, surely. But it was their companion that made Claire's blood run cold. A young man in an expensive suit, identified on the back as cousin. Charles Sterling, the lawyer. She knew that face. Had seen it in her own family albums. Her great-grandfather, Charles Sterling, who had built the family fortune in property development in the 1920s. "I need to research something," she said, her voice strange to her own ears. "Thomas, keep these safe. We'll need to contact lawyers, historians, someone who can verify." "You're a Sterling," Thomas said. It wasn't accusatory, just sad. "That's why you're here." "I didn't know," Claire said. "I swear I didn't know." Thomas studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you. Question is, what do you do now that you do know?" Claire looked at Lily, who was tracing the edge of Margaret's photograph with one small finger. The child looked up at her with those wise eyes. "You make it right," Lily said. "That's what the sad lady wants. That's why you're here." As morning turned to afternoon, Claire sat surrounded by evidence of a century-old crime. Her family's fortune, built on theft and lies. Thomas's family, cheated of their birthright, kept as servants on land that should have been theirs. She thought of Margaret, frightened and alone, hiding these precious things in the earth before she vanished. Had she known what would happen to her? Had she hoped that someday someone would find the truth she'd buried with such care? The pear tree cast its shadow through the window, and Claire made her decision. Whatever it cost, whatever it meant for. Her own legacy, she would see justice done. The sad lady had waited long enough. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced above the scattered photographs and documents. They had moved the precious evidence to the large farmhouse table, spreading each piece out with careful hands. History lay before them, demanding to be acknowledged. Thomas had made tea, the ordinary ritual grounding them in the present while they excavated the past. Lily sat between them, her sketch pad forgotten, eyes moving from one photograph to another with the intensity of a scholar. "This deed," Claire said, holding the fragile document up to the light. "It's dated just 2 weeks before Margaret disappeared. She must have known something was going to happen." Thomas picked up the birth certificate. Rose Bellwether. Born June 15th, 1924. My grandmother was born in June. Always celebrated her birthday on the 15th. His voice caught. "She died thinking she was nobody?" "A charity case. She was loved," Claire said softly. "Look at these photographs. Look at Margaret's face when she holds her baby. That's not the face of a woman who gave her child away willingly." They studied the images more carefully. Margaret with her baby in the garden. Margaret and the young man clearly, the father standing by the very pear tree where they found the box. His clothes marked him as working class, but his face was kind, his protective stance around Margaret unmistakable. "Do you know who he was?" Claire asked. Thomas shook his head. "Grandmother never knew her father. The woman who raised her, Sarah, her name was, she was Margaret's personal maid. Never married, devoted her life to raising my grandmother." Looking back, that was strange, wasn't it? A maid taking on an infant, never seeking a husband, staying here as housekeeper, even after the Sterlings took over. She was protecting Rose, Claire said, keeping her close to her birthright even if she couldn't claim it. Lily had been examining the locket with fascination. Now she held it up to the light. "There's something else," she said. "Look, behind the photograph." Claire took the locket, carefully prying out the tiny photograph of baby Rose. Behind it, pressed flat by decades, was a minute key. "What do you suppose that opens?" Thomas wondered. Claire turned it over in her palm. It was brass tarnished butt, intact, with a number engraved on its head, 247, a safety deposit box, she suggested, or a post office box. Something that might hold more documents? Thomas pulled out his phone. "The old Thornfield Bank is still operating in the village. Been there since the 1880s. They might have records." While he made calls, Claire returned to the photographs. Charles Sterling appeared in several, always hovering at the edges of family gatherings. Her great-grandfather, the man who'd built the Sterling business empire. The family story was that he'd been a brilliant businessman, buying distressed properties and developing them. Now she wondered how many of those properties had been acquired through darker means. "They'll see us," Thomas said, ending his call. "The bank manager says they still have boxes from that era in their vault. If 247 is one of theirs, and if the fees have been paid—" "The fees?" Claire frowned. Some of the old accounts were set up with perpetual payment funds. Interest pays the box rental in perpetuity. It was common for wealthy families back then. They drove to the village in Claire's car, the box of evidence locked in Thomas's cottage for safekeeping. Only the key and a few photographs came with them. The Thornfield Bank stood on the high street, its Victorian facade unmarked by time. Inside, brass fixtures and marble floors spoke of an era when banks were temples to financial security. The manager, Mr. Pemberton, was younger than Claire expected, but he handled the old key with appropriate reverence. "Box 247, he confirmed, checking his records. "Opened in 1924 by a Miss Bellwether. The account was set up rather cleverly. Interest from a trust fund pays the rental. We've been maintaining it all these years, waiting for someone with the key." He led them down to the vault, past modern safety deposit boxes to an older section. Box 247 was larger than the others, made of brass that had darkened with age. The key turned smoothly, as if the lock had been waiting. Inside were more documents, better preserved than those buried in the garden. Marriage certificate. Margaret had married her young man, David Turner, in a small church 2 counties away. Letters from lawyers threatening action if she didn't sign over her inheritance. And at the bottom, a leather journal. They returned to Thornfield to read it properly. Margaret's handwriting was elegant, but increasingly frantic as the entries progressed. She wrote of falling in love with David, a gardener at Thornfield, of her family's rage when they discovered her pregnancy, of threats and ultimatums. The final entries were heartbreaking. They say I must choose my child or my inheritance, as if there could be any choice. Rose is my world entire, but I fear what Charles and father will do. Charles has drawn up papers, says I must sign or face ruin. He speaks of David meeting with accidents, of Rose being taken from me. I cannot risk their lives. I have hidden what proof I can. If something happens to me, I pray someone will find it and know the truth. I leave tonight. Sarah will care for Rose. I trust her above all others. Perhaps someday I can return, when father's anger is cooled. I go to make them think I've fled. I will hide until it's safe. The old hunting lodge. No one uses it anymore. A few days only, then I'll return for my daughter. The last entry was dated October 3rd, 1924. She never made it back. Thomas said quietly. Claire was already searching her phone. Old hunting lodge here. The Bellwether Hunting Lodge, 5 miles into the woods. It was destroyed in a fire in October 1924. She looked up, face pale. October 5th, 2 days after her last entry. Silence fell like a stone into still water. Even Lily seemed to understand the weight of what they'd discovered. They killed her, Thomas said flatly. Burned the lodge with her in it. The records say it was an accident, Claire read from the Historical Society's website. Vagrants cooking. Fire, they claimed. 1 unidentified body found. The Bellwether family declined to rebuild. Of course they did, Thomas said bitterly. And then they sold to your great-grandfather, who just happened to have the exact amount needed to save them from bankruptcy. Claire felt sick. The sterling fortune, built on murder and theft. Her comfortable life, her education, her business all rooted in blood. What do we do? Thomas asked, but it was Lily who answered, her young voice clear and certain. We tell the truth. We show everyone what really happened, and we give back what was stolen. Claire met Thomas's eyes. He was watching her warily, this woman who bore the name of his family's oppressors. She understood his caution. Blood money had paid for her privileges, while his family served as groundskeepers on land that should have been theirs. She's right, Claire said. We document everything. We'll need lawyers, historians, journalists maybe. This isn't just about property. It's about murder. And Thomas? She reached across the table to grasp his weathered hand. Whatever happens, I promise you this. Your family will have what's rightfully yours. I'll make it right. Thomas squeezed her hand in return, and for the first time since they'd opened the box, he smiled. Margaret would be glad, he said. To know the truth finally came to light. As evening drew in, they carefully packed away the evidence. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and questions, challenges, and complications. The Sterling family would not give up their secrets easily. But tonight, in the kitchen of Thornfield Estate, 3 unlikely allies sat together, united by a promise made to a woman who'd been silenced a century ago. Margaret Bellwether would have her justice at last. Dawn came gray and misty, matching Claire's troubled mood. She'd spent the night wrestling with the weight of her family's crimes, sleep eluding her, as Margaret's words echoed in her mind. By first light, she was in the library, determined to. find more evidence of what had transpired in this house. The library at Thornfield was a magnificent room, 2 stories high, with a gallery running around the upper level. Leather-bound volumes filled every shelf, their gold lettering catching the weak morning sun. Somewhere in this collection, there had to be more answers. She started with the household accounts for 1924. The ledgers were meticulous, recording every expense down to the penny. But around October, the entries became erratic. Large sums paid to C. Sterling, legal services. Servants' wages stopped abruptly. A payment to Johnson & Sons Builders, dated October 6th, the day after the fire. You're up early. Claire looked up to find Lily in the doorway, already dressed for school, but carrying her ever-present sketch pad. Couldn't sleep, Claire admitted. What are you doing here? Grandpa's making breakfast. He sent me to fetch you. The girl wandered into the library, running her fingers along the book spines. Great-great-grandmother Sarah used to read to. My grandmother here said there were secret places where the family kept special things. Secret places? Lily nodded, moving with purpose toward the far wall. See, the shelves don't match perfectly here. Sarah said old Mr. Bellwether had hiding spots built in. During the war before, when everyone was scared, Claire followed the girl to a section of shelving that did indeed look different. The books here were uniform sets, all matching leather bindings. 2 uniforms, she realized. She pulled at one volume and found it was false, merely a decorated box. Inside was dust and disappointment, but Lily wasn't discouraged. Sarah said Miss Margaret was clever. She wouldn't hide things where her father expected. The girl stood on tiptoe, running her hands along the shelves. She loved Shakespeare, Sarah said. Read the plays aloud in the garden. The Shakespeare section was on the upper gallery. Claire and Lily climbed the spiral staircase, their footsteps echoing in. The morning quiet, the complete works stood in matching Morocco leather, pristine and probably valuable. Which was her favorite? Claire asked. Lily closed her eyes, remembering. Sarah said she loved the sad ones, especially the one about the girl who pretended to be dead, Romeo and Juliet. Claire pulled the volume from the shelf. It was heavier than it should be. Her heart racing, she opened it to find the pages had been cut away, creating a hollow space. Inside was a slim leather journal. They brought it down to better light. Margaret's handwriting filled the pages, more personal than the documents they'd found before. This was her private diary, hidden where only someone who truly knew her would look. The entries painted a picture of a young woman trapped between love and duty. She wrote of meeting David Turner when he came to restore the rose garden, of stolen moments and growing affection, of the joy and terror when she discovered her pregnancy. Father is livid, one entry read. He says I have destroyed the family name. Charles whispers poison in his ear, speaks of commitments to asylums, of forced adoptions. But I will not give up my child. David and I were married in secret, Father. Jonathan performed the ceremony. At least before God, we are not sinners. Later entries grew darker. Charles has shown his true nature at last. He covets Thornfield, has always resented that it would pass to me. He has convinced Father that I am mad, that my delusions about David prove my unfitness. They have locked me in my room. Only Sarah is allowed to attend me. The baby comes soon. Sarah has arranged everything. She will claim the child as her sister's orphan. Papers already drawn up. It breaks my heart, but Rose will be safe. That is all that matters now. I have signed Charles's papers. I had no choice. He threatened to have David arrested for theft. Said evidence would be found. I know what that means. But I have hidden the true deed, the record of Rose's birth. Someday, when she is grown, she can claim what is hers. The final entry was different. Written in haste. Charles knows about the marriage. He is coming with doctors. Speaks of treatments to cure my hysteria. Sarah will get me out tonight. The hunting lodge first, then David will meet me with a carriage. We go to London, to friends who will help. I leave this record so the truth will be known. I am not mad. I loved truly and was truly loved in return. Remember me. Claire closed the journal, tears blurring her vision. Lily had crept close, reading over her shoulder. She never made it to London, the girl said softly. No, she never even made it out of the woods. They were quiet for a moment. Then Lily asked, what happened to David, the baby's father? Claire had been wondering the same thing. She returned to the household accounts, searching the weeks after the fire. There a payment to the county coroner. She cross-referenced with her phone, searching historical records. David Turner Gardner died October 7th, 1924. Fell from a ladder while trimming trees. Broken neck. She looked at Thomas, who had appeared in the doorway. 2 days after Margaret died, tying up loose ends, Thomas said grimly. With both parents dead, who would question an orphan being raised by a maid? They spent the morning combing the library for more evidence. In a box of estate maps, they found architectural drawings with Charles Sterling's notes plans for improvements, dated before Margaret's death. In the family Bible, someone had scratched out Margaret's name, but the indentation remained. It was Lily who made the final discovery. Behind a row of agricultural journals, she found a small packet of letters tied with ribbon. Love letters from David to Margaret, hidden where no bellwether man would think to look. David's writing was less educated, but deeply moving. He wrote of his dreams for their future, of the cottage he would build for her, of the children who would play in gardens he would plant. His last letter was dated October 2nd. My darling, Sarah says you are not well, that your father keeps you prisoner. I will come for you, whatever the danger. We will go far away, where no one knows the Sterling name or cares for bellwether gold. Wait for me at the lodge. I will come with the moon. All my love always, David. He never knew, Claire said. Never knew she died trying to reach him. Thomas gathered the letters carefully. My grandmother would have treasured these. Proof that she came from love, not shame. They heard a car in the drive. Through the window, Claire saw a black Mercedes, sleek and somehow menacing in the morning light. A man emerged, silver-haired and sharp-suited, carrying a briefcase. That's Richard Sterling, Claire said, recognizing him from family photos. My cousin. He's a lawyer. How did he know? Thomas began. The bank, Claire realized. Pemberton must have notified someone about the safety deposit box. Richard Sterling rang the doorbell with proprietary confidence. Claire met him in the entrance hall, very conscious of Thomas and Lily behind her, of the journal weighing heavy in her pocket. Claire, Richard said, his smile not reaching his eyes. What a surprise to find you here. When I heard someone had finally bought the old place, I never imagined it would be family. Hello, Richard. His gaze swept past her to Thomas and Lily. Hardly, isn't it? Still keeping the grounds, I see. How traditional. He turned back to Claire. We should talk privately. Whatever you have to say can be said here, Claire replied. Thomas and Lily are my friends. Richard's smile tightened. Very well. I understand you've been exploring the estate's history, making inquiries at the bank, opening boxes that have been sealed for very good reasons. Reasons like murder? The word hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Richard's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold beneath. You always were too imaginative, Claire. Just like your father. He asked questions too, you know, about the family business, about old Charles. We had to have quite a serious talk with him about family loyalty. He set his briefcase on a hall table, clicking it open. Now, I'm sure whatever old papers you found have given you all sorts of romantic notions. But the past is past. The Sterling family has interests to protect. The Hartley family has. Rights to claim, Claire countered. Richard laughed, a sound like ice-breaking. Rights? Based on what? The fantasies of a disturbed young woman who ran off with a gardener? The forged documents of a servant trying to elevate her bastard child? Please, we have proof. You have nothing that would stand in court. Trust me, I've made sure of that. Records can be lost, documents questioned, witnesses. He paused significantly. Well, witnesses from that time are all dead, aren't they? He pulled papers from his briefcase. However, the family is prepared to be generous. In exchange for whatever materials you found and your signature on these confidentiality agreements, we're willing to make a substantial payment. Enough to make you all very comfortable. You want to buy our silence, Thomas said flatly. I want to preserve the family reputation, Richard corrected, and ensure that certain stories don't upset people who might be hurt by them. Your granddaughter, for instance, such a bright child. It would be a shame if her scholarship to St. Catherine's had to be reviewed. These old endowments have such specific morality clauses. The threat was velvet-wrapped, but unmistakable. Claire felt fury rise in her chest, clean and clarifying. Get out, she said quietly. Get out of my house. Your house? Richard's eyebrows rose. I think you'll find the Sterling family has rather strong claims to this property. After all, we've maintained it for generations, paid the taxes, kept the staff. Some might say that creates its own form of ownership. The only claim you have is based on theft and murder, Claire said, and I will prove it. Richard's face darkened. You're making a grave mistake, cousin. The Sterling family has resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, connections, influence. We've weathered scandals before, but you've never faced someone with nothing left to lose. Thomas stepped forward. My family served yours for 3 generations, always knowing something was wrong, never able to prove it. Now we can. And what will you do? Richard sneered. Take your pathetic box of letters. To court? Do you have any idea what our lawyers will do to you? To your reputation? To your granddaughter's future? Lily, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. The sad lady isn't sad anymore, she said in her clear, young voice. She's angry, and she wants everyone to know what you did. Richard actually stepped back, something flickering in his eyes. Fear? Claire pressed the advantage. Leave now, Richard. Tell the family that their secrets are coming to light. Tell them Claire Sterling stands with the Hartleys. And tell them, she pulled Margaret's journal from her pocket, holding it up, that we have her own words. Her truth. Richard's composure finally cracked. You have no idea what you're starting. This won't end well for any of you. He snapped his briefcase shut. Don't say I didn't warn you. After he left, they stood in the hall, the weight of what they'd begun settling over them. He'll be back, Thomas said, with more threats, more lawyers. Then we'd better be ready, Claire replied. She looked at the journal in her hands, then at her unlikely allies. We need help. Historians, investigative journalists, anyone who can verify these documents and get the story out before the Sterling lawyers can bury it. I know someone, Thomas said slowly. Reporter for The Guardian. Did a series on historical injustices and reparations. She might be interested. Contact her, Claire said. I'll reach out to a historian I know at Oxford. And Thomas? Move anything valuable from your cottage. Keep Lily close. I don't trust Richard to play fair. As they dispersed to their tasks, Claire remained in the library, surrounded by the weight of history. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch her bellwethers and Sterlings, victims and villains, all part of this tragic tapestry. She thought of her father, who'd asked questions and been silenced, of all the Sterlings who'd known the truth and chosen wealth over justice. She wouldn't be one of them. Whatever it cost, whatever Richard and the family threw at her, she would see this through. Margaret Bellwether deserved justice. Rose deserved her birthright. And Lily deserved a future free from the shadows of the past. The truth would out, as Shakespeare himself had written. And Claire would make sure of it. The next days passed in a blur of research and revelation. Claire had converted the morning room into a war room of sorts, with copies of documents spread across every surface, timelines drawn on whiteboards, and her laptop constantly humming. With searches through digital archives, Dr. Emma Thornton from Oxford had arrived that morning, a small woman with sharp eyes and an encyclopedic knowledge of estate law and county records. She'd spent hours examining the documents with professional reverence. "These are extraordinary," she said, adjusting her glasses to peer more closely at the property deed. "The provenance is clear, the signatures authenticated. This would absolutely hold up to historical scrutiny." Thomas's journalist contact, Patricia Wells, sat across from them, her recorder running as she conducted interviews. She'd already photographed every document, taken statements, and begun corroborating the story through public records. "The pattern is clear," Patricia said, reviewing her notes. Charles Sterling acquired 5 other properties between 1924 and 1930, all under suspicious circumstances. Families ruined by scandal or tragedy, forced to sell for pennies on the pound. Your great-grandfather built an empire on others' misfortune. Claire felt the weight of each revelation. She'd spent the previous night going through her father's papers, shipped from storage. Now she understood his cryptic notes, his questions about the founding fortune, his sudden decision to distance himself from the family business before his death. "He knew," she said quietly, showing them a letter her father had written but never sent. "He suspected the truth and tried to investigate. Then he died in that car accident." "When was this?" Patricia asked, suddenly alert. 1995. He just started asking questions about the family history. Hired a private investigator to look into old Charles. Patricia exchanged glances with Dr. Thornton. "Claire, I hate to suggest this, but given what we're learning about your family's methods, you think they killed him too?" It wasn't a question. Claire had been circling that possibility since finding his notes. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lily peered in, her school uniform dusty from the garden. "There's more people here," she announced. "Fancy cars?" Through the window, Claire could see 3 vehicles in the drive. Richard emerged from one, accompanied by 2 other men she recognized as Sterling board members. From the second car came an elderly woman, leaning on a silver-headed cane. Great Aunt Vivian, the family matriarch. The third car disgorged what could only be lawyers. "The family summit," Claire murmured. "They're bringing out the big guns." "Want us to leave?" Thomas asked, but Claire shook her head. "Stay, all of you. They need to know we're not backing down." The delegation filled the entrance hall with expensive cologne and barely concealed hostility. Vivian Sterling, 93 years old and sharp as a blade, fixed Claire with eyes the color of winter frost. "So," she said, her cultured voice carrying despite its age, "you're the one causing all this fuss." "Hello, Aunt Vivian." "Don't." The old woman raised her cane slightly. "You forfeit the right to familiarity when you betray family. Richard tells me you've been spreading lies about Charles." "Not lies. Truth." Claire stood straighter. "We have proof that Charles Sterling conspired to murder Margaret Bellwether and steal her estate." One of the lawyers started to speak, but Vivian silenced him with a gesture. "Proof? You have the fantasies of a disturbed girl who dishonored her family. Nothing more. We have her journal, her marriage certificate, the birth record of her daughter, the property deed leaving everything to that daughter Thomas's grandmother." Vivian's eyes flicked to Thomas, dismissing him in a glance. "Servants' gossip and forged documents. Charles saved that estate from ruin, gave employment to the very people who now bite the hand that fed them." Charles murdered 2 people and stole their child's inheritance. Charles built an empire. Vivian's cane struck the floor. He took a failing estate and made it profitable. He gave that foundling child a home, her descendants employment. Where's the crime in that? Where's the crime? Claire felt her control slipping. He burned Margaret alive. He broke David Turner's neck. He destroyed lives for profit. You have no proof of that. Only speculation and sentiment. Vivian turned to her lawyers. Tell her. The lead attorney, a man with the look of someone who charged by the breath, cleared his throat. Ms. Sterling, any attempt to publicize these allegations will result in immediate legal action. Defamation, libel, interference with business relations. Sue me, Claire interrupted. Please, I'd love to see this play out in court. As would I. Patricia Wells stepped forward, showing her press credentials. The Guardian has quite an interest in historical injustices. Our readers love a good story about aristocratic murder and stolen fortunes. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably. Vivian's eyes narrowed. And what do you want? She asked Claire. Money? Is that it? Name your price. I want justice for Margaret Bellwether. I want Thomas's family to have what's rightfully theirs. The Hartleys? Vivian laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. You'd give Thornfield to the help? I'd give it to its rightful owners. Then you're a fool. Vivian moved closer, her perfume heavy with age and roses. Do you think the world cares about something that happened a century ago? Do you think anyone will weep for a dead girl who couldn't keep her legs closed? The crude words in that cultured voice were shocking, but they also revealed the truth. The Sterling family knew exactly what had happened, had always known. You've always known, Claire said slowly. All of you. It's not a family secret. It's a family tradition. Protecting the crime that built your fortune. Vivian smiled, a terrible expression on her ancient face. Of course we knew. Charles kept excellent records, very detailed. Very instructive for future generations. My God, Dr. Thornton had gone pale. You're confessing to conspiracy. I'm explaining reality, Vivian corrected. The strong survive. The weak are consumed. Margaret Bellwether was weak. Her lover was weak. They were removed, and the Sterling family grew strong. That's the natural order. That's murder, Thomas said, his voice shaking with controlled rage. Vivian turned her cold gaze on him. That's business, Mr. Hartley. Your grandmother survived because we allowed it. Your family has had employment for generations because we provided it. You should be grateful. Grateful? Lily stepped out from behind her grandfather. Grateful that you killed my great-great-great-grandmother? That you stole our home? For the first time, Vivian seemed unsettled. Children were clearly not part of her usual negotiations. Control your child, she told Thomas. She's right, Claire said, and everyone's going to know it. We're publishing everything, the documents, the story, all of it. Then you'll be destroyed, Richard spoke for the first time. Your business connections, your reputation, your friends, we'll take it all. The Sterling name carries weight. We'll bury you. The Sterling name is built on blood, Claire replied, and I'm done carrying it. She pulled out her phone, showing them the email she'd prepared. One click, and every major newspaper in the country gets our evidence. Dr. Thornton's authentication, Patricia's investigation, everything. You wouldn't dare, one of the board members sputtered. Try me. The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Then Vivian laughed again, stepping back. Send it, she said. Go ahead. Destroy your own family. Live with the consequences. But know this, dear Claire, you'll never be free of us. The Sterling blood is in your veins. The Sterling crimes paid for your education, your comfortable life, every advantage you've ever had. You are us, whether you like it or not. She turned, her entourage following. At the door, she paused. "Enjoy your righteousness, Claire. It's all you'll have left when we're done with you." After they left, the room seemed to exhale. Claire's hands shook as she looked at her phone, at the email that would change everything. "Are you really going to send it?" Thomas asked quietly. Claire looked at him, at Lily with her fierce young face, at Patricia and Dr. Thornton, who'd risked their reputations to help strangers find justice. "Every family has a choice," she said, "to continue the sins of the past or break the cycle. I know what I choose." She pressed send. The email went out to dozens of recipients' newspapers, historical societies, legal aid organizations. There was no taking it back now. The truth about the sterling fortune was in the world. What happens now? Lily asked. Claire knelt to meet the girl's eyes. "Now we fight. It won't be easy. They'll come at us with everything they have. But we have something they don't." "What's that?" "We have the truth, and we have each other." As if in response, her phone began to ring. Journalists, lawyers, historians, the story was already spreading. The sterling empire, built on a foundation of murder and lies, was about to face its reckoning. And somewhere in the garden, Claire could almost swear she felt Margaret Bellwether's presence, no longer sad but satisfied. The truth she'd died trying to protect had finally come to light. The Sterling family's retaliation came swift and brutal. Within 24 hours of Claire sending the email, the attacks began on multiple fronts, each designed to break their resolve and silence their voices. Claire woke to her phone buzzing incessantly. Her lawyer in California was calling about an emergency audit of her company. Sale irregularities had been discovered that could void the entire transaction. Her bank informed her that her accounts had been frozen, pending investigation of suspicious activities. Even her credit cards stopped working. "They're trying to starve me out," she told Thomas over breakfast. They'd taken to eating together, a small unit of resistance against the sterling machine. Thomas's own troubles had started immediately. A formal letter arrived by courier, terminating his employment as groundskeeper, effective immediately for breach of confidentiality clauses. The cottage they'd lived in for generations, property of the estate, to be vacated within 7 days. "Where will we go?" Lily asked, her brave facade finally cracking. "We'll figure it out," Thomas assured her, but Claire could see the worry in his eyes. His savings were modest, his options limited. "You'll stay here," Claire said firmly. "Both of you. This house is big enough for all of us, and frankly, I could use the company." "But they're saying you don't really own it," Thomas protested. "That there are liens, claims. Let them try to take it. We'll fight every step." Patricia Wells called with her own news. "My editor's getting pressure. Threats of lawsuits. Pulled advertising. They're not backing down yet, but they want more corroboration before we publish." Dr. Thornton faced her own challenges. "The university is suddenly very concerned about my methodology in authenticating historical documents. There's talk of a review board, questions about my tenure. But the cruelest blow is aimed at Lily. The principal of St. Catherine's School called, regretfully informing them that Lily's scholarship had been revoked due to changes in the endowment structure. Furthermore, questions had been raised about her grandfather's character that made her continued enrollment problematic. "They're targeting a child," Claire said, fury burning in her chest. "What kind of people go after a 9-year-old? "The kind who burn women alive for money," Thomas replied grimly. That afternoon brought a new visitor, not a sterling, but someone far more dangerous. Marcus Finch introduced himself as a resolution specialist, a euphemism that fooled no one. He was smooth, professional, and radiated the kind of controlled menace that came from absolute confidence in his methods. "Ms. Sterling," he said, settling into the parlor as if he owned it. "I'm here to offer you a final opportunity to resolve this matter quietly. I've made my position clear. Have you?" He pulled out a tablet, swiping through files. Let's review your situation. Your assets are frozen. Your reputation is about to be destroyed by a carefully orchestrated campaign painting you as a mentally unstable woman who's fabricated evidence to extort your own family. Mr. Hartley here will be portrayed as a disgruntled employee who's manipulated a vulnerable widow for financial gain. None of that's true. Truth is surprisingly flexible in the right hands. He turned the tablet toward her. These are the stories that will run if you persist. Your father's mental health struggles? Did you know he was treated for paranoid delusions? No? We have the medical records. Your own history of anxiety medication. Mr. Hartley's wife's gambling debts. Tragic how she hid them from him. Young Lily's learning disabilities and behavioral issues at her previous school. She doesn't have any. Thomas stood, fists clenched. She will by the time we're done. Finch's smile was reptilian. We can create any narrative we need. Or, he pulled out a different folder. We can make all this go away. The folder contained a settlement agreement. In exchange for all evidence and perpetual silence, the Sterling family would pay Claire $20 million and grant Thomas a lifetime tenancy in the cottage with a generous annual stipend. Lily would receive a full scholarship to any school of her choice. It's a good offer, Finch said. More than fair. Your alternative is destruction, personal, financial, complete. The Sterling family has resources you can't imagine. They own judges, politicians, media moguls. You're fighting a war you've already lost. Claire looked at the documents, then at Thomas and Lily. The money would solve their immediate problems. Lily could have the education she deserved. Thomas could live comfortably for the rest of his days. All they had to do was let Margaret Bellwether stay buried. What do you think? She asked Thomas quietly. He was silent for a long moment, then reached for his granddaughter's hand. What I think is that my grandmother lived her whole life believing she was nobody. She died thinking she was charity case taken in out of pity. This money won't change that. But Lily's future. My future is knowing where I come from, Lily interrupted. Knowing my great-grandmother was loved and murdered for it. That's worth more than their blood money. Claire turned back to Finch. You have our answer. His pleasant mask finally slipped. You're making a terrible mistake. What comes next won't be civilized. We offered you a soft landing. Now you'll get the hard fall. Get out of my house. After he left, they sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of what they'd rejected. Then Claire's phone rang Patricia Wells. You need to see the news, the journalist said. The Sterling PR machine just went into overdrive. The attacks were everywhere. Social media posts questioning Claire's mental stability. Blog articles about Thomas's history of extortion attempts against former employers, all fabricated but convincing. Even a psychiatric professional discussing the dangers of shared delusions and how vulnerable people could be manipulated into believing fantasies. They're discrediting us before the story even breaks, Patricia said. My editor's getting cold feet. Without something more, something undeniable. That night, Claire lay awake thinking. The Sterlings had generations of practice in burying inconvenient truths. They had money, connections, and the ruthlessness to use both. What did she have? Documents that could be questioned, a journalist, under pressure, and a historian whose career was being threatened. But she also had something else, the truth. And Margaret Bellwether, who'd hidden that truth so carefully, must have known this day might come. The journal, the photographs, the deed, they were breadcrumbs on a trail. What if there was more? What if Margaret had hidden something the Sterlings didn't know about? She found Thomas in the kitchen at dawn, making tea and looking haggard. We need to search again, she said. The whole estate. Margaret was clever. She wouldn't have put all her eggs in one basket. There's something else, something we're missing. Where do we even start? 10 acres is a lot of ground. We start with Lily, Claire decided. She's been drawn to specific places since I arrived. The pear tree was just the beginning. Where else does she go? Where else does she draw? They found Lily already up, sitting in the garden with her sketch pad. The morning light revealed what? She'd been drawing the same angel statue over and over, from different angles. A grieving angel, Thomas said. It's in the old section of the garden, near the family crypt. They made their way through overgrown paths to a forgotten corner of the estate. The angel stood on a plinth, her marble wings folded, her face carved in eternal sorrow. The inscription was warm but legible, for those who sleep unremembered. Sarah had this made, Thomas said suddenly. My grandmother mentioned it once. Said her mother saved for years to commission it. I always thought it was just servant sentiment. But what if it was more? Claire examined the statue's base. What if Sarah was marking something? They searched carefully, mindful of the statue's age and delicacy. It was Lily who noticed the oddity. One of the plinth stones was slightly different, its mortar newer than the rest. Someone's opened this before, Claire said, recently, within the last few decades. They worked the stone loose carefully. Behind it was a metal box, modern and waterproof. Inside were documents, photographs, and a cassette tape labeled, For Rose's Children, The Truth at Last. Claire's hands shook as she examined the contents. More evidence, yes, but also something extraordinary: carbon copies of letters between Charles Sterling and various officials, bribing them to rule Margaret's death accidental. Bank records showing payments to the men who'd set the fire. And photographs of a young woman who looked remarkably like Lily. That's my grandmother, Thomas breathed. Young, but definitely her. The cassette tape would need a player, but one photograph made Claire's heart stop. It showed her own father with an elderly woman, Rose herself. On the back, in her father's handwriting, the truth will out. Rose Bellwether Hartley, 1994. He found her, Claire whispered. My father found Rose before she died. He knew everything. And if he'd hidden this here, in a place only the Hartley family would know to look, that meant he was trying to make it right, Thomas said. Your father was going to expose everything. And they killed him for it. Claire finished. They had what they needed now, not just historical evidence, but proof of an ongoing conspiracy. The Sterling family had murdered to keep their secret in 1924, and they'd killed again in 1995. This changes everything, Thomas said. Claire nodded, her phone already in her hand. Patricia, we found something. Something that proves the cover-up continues to this day. How fast can you get here? The Sterling family had made a crucial mistake. They'd threatened a child. They'd awakened the anger Claire had been trying to contain. And now she had proof that their crimes weren't just historical, they were ongoing. The war was far from over, but the tide had just turned. The discovery beneath the angel statue changed everything. Patricia Wells arrived within the hour, accompanied by her editor and a forensic document expert. Dr. Thornton brought colleagues from Oxford's history department. Even Claire's California lawyer flew in, sensing the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. They set up in the library, transforming it into a proper investigation center. The cassette tape, when played on an old deck Thomas found in the attic, contained Rose Hartley's voice. Claire's father must have recorded her testimony before her death. My name is Rose Hartley, born Rose Bellwether, the elderly voice began, wavering but determined. I'm 90 years old, and before I die, I need to tell the truth about what happened to my mother, Margaret Bellwether, and my father, David Turner. For 40 minutes, Rose detailed everything Sarah had told her over the years. The love affair, the secret marriage, Margaret's fear of Charles Sterling, the night she fled to the hunting lodge, Sarah's account of seeing the fire from her window, of Charles Sterling returning to the house with soot on his clothes, smiling. Sarah kept me safe all those years, Rose continued. Raised me as her sister's child, never let on I was the rightful heir to Thornfield. She said it was the only way to protect me from the Sterlings. But she saved everything, every paper, every photograph, every proof of who I really was. She hid them for me, for my children, for the day when it would be safe to tell the truth. The recording ended with Rose directly addressing whoever found it. Make them pay, not with money, but with truth. Let the world know what the Sterling family really is. This is devastating, Patricia's editor said. With this recording, the contemporary documents, and what you found in the garden, we have enough for a series. That will shake the Sterling Empire to its foundations. But it was the carbon copies that proved most damaging. Charles Sterling had been meticulous, keeping records of every bribe, every threat, every step in his cover-up. His arrogance in preserving evidence of his crimes would be his family's undoing. Look. At this, Dr. Thornton said, examining a letter. He's actually bragging about how easily the coroner was bought. And here instructions to make David Turner's death look accidental. Claire's lawyer had been researching the implications. With evidence of ongoing conspiracy. Your father's death in 1995. There's no statute of limitations. This is murder, conspiracy, fraud on a massive scale. Criminal charges are possible, even probable. As they worked, Lily sat quietly in the corner, drawing. But now her picture showed a different scene, a sad lady in the garden, but smiling. Now, holding hands with a man, a baby in her arms. The family Margaret should have had. That evening, Patricia's first article went live on the Guardian website. The headline was stark. The Sterling Fortune. A century of murder, theft, and cover-up. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the story was trending globally. Other journalists picked up the thread, investigating Sterling properties, finding similar patterns of suspicious acquisitions. Historians came forward with corroborating research. Most importantly, the police announced they were opening an investigation into both historical and recent crimes. The Sterling response was swift, but now seemed desperate rather than dominant. Their lawyers sent cease and desist letters that Patricia's paper gleefully published as evidence of attempted suppression. Their PR firm quit, unwilling to defend the indefensible. Stock in Sterling companies plummeted, but the real victory came in smaller ways. Thomas received calls from distant relatives he'd never known. Existed other descendants of the bellwether line who'd been scattered and silenced. Lily's scholarship to St. Catherine's was mysteriously reinstated after several. Major donors threatened to withdraw support if the school punished a child for her family seeking justice. On the fourth day after the story broke, Vivian Sterling came to Thornfield alone. No lawyers, no entourage. Just an old woman with a cane and a lifetime of secrets. Claire met her in the parlor, Thomas and Lily beside her. They were a family now, forged by shared purpose. You've destroyed us, Vivian said without preamble. A century of building, and you've torn it down in a week. You destroyed yourselves, Claire replied. We just shone a light on it. Vivian was silent for a moment, then laughed a sound like winter wind. Perhaps. Charles always said the secret to power was making sure no one remembered what you'd done to get it. But you've made them remember, haven't you? Margaret deserved to be remembered. Rose deserved to know she was loved. Love? Vivian spat the word. Love makes people weak. Charles knew that. It's why he survived, and Margaret didn't. Is that why you had my father killed? Claire asked directly. Because he chose love over family loyalty? Vivian's smile was terrible. Your father was a romantic, like you. He thought the truth mattered more than family. Charles would have been disappointed. All that Sterling blood wasted on conscience. It was as close to a confession as they would get. Claire's lawyer was recording everything, but Vivian didn't seem to care anymore. What do you want? The old woman asked finally. The estate? The money? You've already taken our reputation. We want justice. Thomas said firmly. Legal acknowledgement that Thornfield belongs to the Bellwether heirs. Reparations for a century of theft. And criminal charges for everyone involved in the cover-up, including me? Vivian asked with dark amusement. I'm 93, Mr. Hartley. Prison would be a brief inconvenience. Then it should be easy to bear, Lily said with a child's brutal honesty. Vivian studied the girl, something flickering in her ancient eyes. You have Margaret's look about you. That same stubborn chin, same defiant gaze. Charles feared that defiance, you know. It's why he had to destroy her. She stood, leaning heavily on her cane. You'll have your justice. What good it does you. The lawyers will be in touch about transferring the estate. As for criminal charges, she shrugged, let them come. I'm tired of carrying Charles's secrets. At the door, she paused. That guardian angel in the garden, Sarah, had it made as a grave marker, you know. Margaret's real grave. She's buried beneath it, has been all along. Charles thought he'd burned her to nothing, but Sarah went back, gathered what she could. Margaret's been here the whole time, waiting. After she left, they stood in stunned silence. Then, moving as one, they went to the garden. The grieving angel looked different now, knowing what lay beneath. Not just a monument, but a gravestone. A mother's secret gift to the daughter who couldn't. Mourn openly. We should have a proper service, Thomas said quietly. A real burial with her name on the stone. And her husband, Claire added. David should be moved here too. They should be together. Lily knelt by the statue, placing her small hand on its base. She's not sad anymore, she said with certainty. She knows we found her. She knows we told her story. That night Claire couldn't sleep. She walked through Thornfield's gardens in the moonlight, thinking about justice and inheritance, about the weight of family sins, the power of truth. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and papers, the complex business of unwinding a century of lies. But tonight, she felt something shift in the air around Thornfield. The oppressive weight that had hung over the estate was lifting. Margaret Bellwether was no longer the sad lady in the garden, a victim silenced by greed. She was a woman who'd loved bravely, died protecting her child, and left enough truth behind to eventually find justice. And Claire Sterling, who'd come to Thornfield seeking peace after loss, had found something better, a purpose, a family, and the knowledge that sometimes, against all odds, truth really could prevail over power. The Sterling Empire would fall. The Bellwether legacy would rise. And in the garden, beneath stars that had watched it all, the grieving angel finally had a reason to smile. The transformation of Thornfield began on a crisp November morning. What had started as a quest for justice became a mission of restoration, not just of property and rights, but of memory and truth itself. Thomas stood in the great hall, the deed to Thornfield in his hands, still seeming stunned by the reversal of fortune. Around him, workers prepared for the first phase of renovations, not to erase the past, but to honor it. We'll restore Margaret's rooms, Claire said, consulting with the historical architect they'd hired. Create a museum space that tells the real story of what happened here. The Sterling family's capitulation had been more complete than expected. The criminal investigations moved swiftly once key family members agreed to cooperate. Marcus Finch, their resolution specialist, was arrested trying to flee the country. Several Sterling board members faced charges for financial fraud discovered during the investigation. As for Vivian, she lay in a private hospital, her stroke rendering her unable to speak or write, trapped in a prison of her own making. But it was the younger Sterlings who surprised everyone. Sophia Sterling threw herself into the work of making amends, using her law degree to help other families investigate historical property crimes. She and 3 cousins formally renounced their inheritance, asking that their portions go to the reparations fund. We can't undo what Charles did, Sophia told Claire over tea one afternoon. but we can choose not to profit from it anymore. The media attention continued, but now it focused on the positive, the restoration of justice, the power of truth, the courage of a child who'd whispered secrets in a garden. Lily became something of a folk hero, the little girl who'd brought down an empire with her drawings and steadfast belief in doing right. The first public event at the restored Thornfield was Margaret Bellwether's proper burial. They'd exhumed her remains from beneath the angel statue with archaeological care, while David Turner's body was moved from the pauper cemetery where he'd been hastily interred. The funeral drew hundreds. Historians, journalists, Sterling family, members seeking redemption, and dozens of people who discovered they, too, had been wronged by Charles Sterling's empire. The Bishop of Winchester himself presided, speaking of justice delayed, but not denied. "We gather not just to bury the dead," he intoned, "but to resurrect truth from the grave of lies where it was too long interred." Margaret and David were buried, side by side in the Thornfield family plot, their headstones simple but dignified. Lily placed her drawings on each grave, not the sad lady anymore, but Margaret smiling, reunited with her love. The legal proceedings moved with surprising speed. With documentation authenticated and Sterling family cooperation, the transfers were clean. Thomas found himself not just owner of Thornfield, but beneficiary of a trust that would maintain the estate for generations. "I don't know what to do with it all," he confessed to Claire one evening. They sat in the kitchen, still their favorite room, while Lily did homework at the scarred wooden table. "You'll do what Margaret would have wanted," Claire said. "Make it a home. Keep it in the family. Tell the truth about its history. Will you stay?" Lily asked, looking up from her mathematics. "Your family, too, now." Claire had been wrestling with that question. Her life in California seemed a lifetime away. The woman who'd bought Thornfield seeking solitude had found something richer: purpose, family, belonging. "If you'll have me," she said. "Course we will," Thomas said gruffly, emotion roughening his voice. "This place is too big for just us anyway." The Sterling Reparations Fund, once established, attracted attention from across the country. Families came forward with similar stories: property stolen through legal chicanery, fortunes built on others' misfortune. A commission was established to investigate claims, with Dr. Thornton as its historical advisor. Patricia Wells won a Pulitzer for her series on the Sterling scandal. Her book on the subject, The Sad Lady's Secret, became a bestseller, but she always credited Lily as her co-author. Without her drawings, her certainty that someone was waiting in that garden, none of this would have happened, Patricia said at the book launch held at Thornfield. The estate itself flourished under its rightful ownership. Thomas proved a thoughtful steward, balancing public access with private family space. The museum drew thousands of visitors, all learning the true story of Margaret Bellwether and the price of greed. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came 6 months after the confrontation. Claire received a package with no return address. Inside was Charles Sterling's personal journal, the one Vivian had mentioned, with his detailed records of his crimes. A note was attached. "Some of us remember what honor means. Use this to help others find justice. A. Sterling who chooses truth." The journal was devastating, revealing dozens of crimes beyond Margaret's murder. More families came forward. More property was restored. The Sterling Empire's dissolution accelerated. "It's like dominoes," Thomas observed, watching news coverage of another Sterling company being investigated. "One falls, they all fall." "Good," Lily said firmly. She was drawing again, but now her pictures showed Thornfield, full of light and laughter, people of all ages gathering in the gardens. That's what happens when you build on lies. 1 year after Claire first heard Lily whisper about the gardens' secret, they held a celebration. The great hall was full of people whose lives had been touched by the revelations at Thornfield. Families reunited with their histories, properties restored, justice finally served. Claire stood to speak, looking Out at the assembled crowd, she saw Sophia Sterling talking animatedly with other young people about their new foundation. She saw Dr. Thornton surrounded by eager students. She saw Patricia Wells interviewing yet another family with a story to tell. But mostly she saw Thomas and Lily, grandfather and granddaughter, sitting in the front row where the family belonged. They'd come so far from that morning when a shy girl had whispered about secrets in the garden. Margaret Bellwether died, believing her truth would someday come to light, Claire began. She hid evidence in the earth, trusting that justice, like seeds, can lie dormant, but not dead. Today we celebrate not just her vindication, but the triumph of truth over power, of love over greed, of justice over expedience. She raised her glass. To Margaret and David, who loved truly. To Rose, who survived. To Sarah, who protected. To Thomas and Lily, who believed. And to all who fight to make right what was wronged, no matter how long it takes. The toast echoed through the hall, through the gardens, perhaps even reaching that place where Margaret waited no more. The sad lady had found her peace. Her daughter's line was restored. Her story was told Dot, and in the garden at Thornfield, beneath an ancient pear tree that still bore fruit, new flowers bloomed where secrets once lay buried. The estate lived again, no longer haunted by sorrow, but blessed by truth. Justice had taken a century to arrive. But when it came, it transformed everything. It touched, proving that some truths are too powerful to stay buried forever. The summons came on sterling silver letterhead, the family crest embossed in navy wax, a final gesture of aristocratic pretension from a dynasty in collapse. Every living sterling was commanded to attend an emergency meeting at Thornfield Estate to determine the family's response to recent events. Claire almost laughed at the presumptuousness. They were summoning her to her own home as if they still owned it. But her lawyer advised attendance. "They're going to make an offer," he said. "With criminal investigations heating up, they need to contain the damage. You hold all the cards now." The appointed day arrived gray and drizzling, pathetic fallacy at its finest. Cars began arriving mid-morning, Mercedes, Bentleys, a classic Rolls that belonged to a Sterling cousin who collected vintage automobiles with money earned from misery. Claire had insisted Thomas and Lily remain with her. "They need to see who they really hurt," she said. "Not abstractions in a ledger, but real people." Patricia Wells was also present, documenting everything. Dr. Thornton had come to provide historical context if needed. They were Claire's truth brigade, against a family built on lies. The Sterlings gathered in the great hall like crows at a funeral. Claire counted 23 members of various branches: industrialists, bankers, politicians, society matrons. Faces she remembered from Christmas dinners and family weddings, all wearing the same expression of mingled fury and fear. Richard Sterling called the meeting to order, though his usual commanding presence had withered. The past week had aged him a decade. "We're here to address the crisis created by Claire's betrayal, the crisis created by Charles Sterling's murders." Claire interrupted. "Let's be accurate." Murmurs of outrage rippled through the room, but she noticed not all seemed shocked. Some of the younger Sterlings looked troubled, conflicted. Perhaps not all of them had known the full truth. "Whatever happened a century ago," Richard continued, "we must deal with present realities. The family's reputation is in ruins. Our stock prices have cratered. Criminal investigations threaten several senior members. We need unified action." "What do you propose?" asked Cousin Miranda, a federal judge who'd been notably silent since the scandal broke. Vivian Sterling spoke from her wheelchair by the fireplace. The past week had finally bent her proud spine. "We propose a settlement. Full transfer of Thornfield to the Hartley family. $50 million in reparations. In exchange, Claire and her associates cease their media campaign and sign agreements not to pursue further civil action. What about criminal charges? Claire asked. Those are beyond our control now, Vivian admitted. But with the primary victim satisfied, prosecutors might be less zealous. Thomas stood, his working man's dignity more impressive than all their inherited polish. 50 million for a century of theft? My grandmother died believing she was. Nobody. My mother scrubbed your floors, thinking she owed you gratitude for the privilege. You took our name, our heritage, our home. We took nothing. Marcus Sterling, Richard's son, erupted from his seat. Why should we pay for something that happened before any of us were born? Because you benefited from it, Lily said clearly. Everyone turned to stare at the child, who stood small but unafraid among titans of industry. Every fancy school you went to, every big house you bought, every nice thing you have, it all came from stealing and killing. That makes you part of it. The room fell silent. From the mouths of babes, Claire thought, and something unexpected happened. A young woman Claire vaguely recognized as Richard's daughter stood up. She's right, Sophia Sterling said. I've been reading the evidence, all of it. What Charles did, what the family covered up, it's monstrous. And we've all been living off blood money. Sophia, Richard barked. Sit down. No. She moved to stand with Claire's group. I won't be part of this anymore. Whatever it costs, we should pay it. We owe them more than money. We owe them justice. Idealistic child, Vivian sneered. You'd destroy your own family for strangers? I'd save my family from itself, Sophia shot back. How many more generations will we poison with these secrets? How many more people will we hurt to protect a fortune built on murder? Her defection opened floodgates. 3 more young Sterlings joined her. Then Miranda spoke up. I've been a judge for 20 years, sworn to uphold justice. How can I sit here and negotiate away murder? Charles Sterling killed 2 people. Others in this room helped cover it up. That demands more than money. It demands accountability. The family began fracturing before their eyes. Old guard versus new. Those desperate to preserve the Sterling legacy against those sickened by its true foundation. Claire seized the moment. Here's what's going to happen. Full ownership of Thornfield transfers to Thomas and his descendants immediately. The family will liquidate sufficient assets to create $100 million trust for reparations, not just to the Hartleys, but to all the families. Charles Sterling destroyed building his empire. Preposterous, someone shouted. I'm not finished. The family will also cooperate fully with all investigations. Those with knowledge of crimes, past or recent, will testify truthfully. In exchange, those who come forward voluntarily will receive consideration from prosecutors. You're asking us to destroy ourselves, Richard said. I'm offering you the chance to save your souls, Claire countered, and perhaps salvage something from the wreckage. The Sterling name doesn't have to die. It can be reborn. Imagine a family foundation dedicated to justice, to making amends. Some of you have children. What legacy do you want to leave them? The younger Sterlings were nodding. Even some middle-aged members looked thoughtful. The empire was crumbling, perhaps. Something better could be built from its ruins. Vivian struggled to her feet, fury animating her withered frame. You fools! You're letting sentiment destroy everything Charles built. The strong take from the weak. That's the way of the world. Then maybe it's time for a new way, Sophia said quietly. The vote, when it came, was closer than Claire expected, but decisive enough. 16 Sterlings voted to accept the terms. 7 opposed. Vivian didn't vote at all. She'd collapsed during the arguments, a stroke stealing her voice at last. As medics carried her out, her eyes blazed with undiminished rage. Papers were signed. That afternoon, Thomas's hands shook as he took possession of the deed that should have been his grandmother's. Lily witnessed with the same gravity she brought to everything, understanding the weight of the moment. But it wasn't over. Richard approached Claire, as the family dispersed. "You've won," he said bitterly. "I hope you're satisfied." "I've found justice," she corrected. "There's a difference." He studied her with eyes so like her father's it hurt. "You know they'll come after you. The old guard won't forgive this. Vivian has allies, resources hidden away. This isn't the end." "Are you threatening me or warning me?" "Warning. You're still my cousin, still Sterling blood, even if you've chosen them over us." He glanced at Thomas and Lily. "Take care of them. They're your family now." As the last car pulled away, Claire stood with her chosen family on the steps of Thornfield. The estate was Thomas's now, legally and morally, but she knew he'd want her to stay. They'd forged bonds stronger than blood through their shared fight. "What happens now?" Lily asked. "Now we start healing," Claire said. "We have Margaret and David properly buried. We restore the estate to honor its true history. We use the settlement to help other families find their own justice." "And the Sterlings who voted with us?" Thomas asked. "We help them too, if they're sincere. Redemption should always be possible." Patricia Wells was already typing on her phone, crafting the story that would announce the resolution. Dr. Thornton spoke of establishing a research center at Thornfield for studying historical injustices. But for now, they simply stood together as rain gave way to weak sunshine. The sad lady of Thornfield was at peace at last. Her daughter's line was restored. Justice, delayed by a century, had finally arrived. Yet Claire remembered Richard's warning. Vivian Sterling might be silenced, but her venom remained in others. The fight for Thornfield was won, but the war against those who believed might made right would continue. She looked at Lily, already sketching the scene, capturing this moment when everything changed. The next generation would know the truth from the start. They would build on foundations of honesty rather than lies. That, more than any fortune, was Margaret Bellwether's true legacy. And Claire Sterling Claire Sterling Hartley, as she decided to style herself, would make sure it endured. 5 years had passed since Lily first whispered about the garden's secret. Thornfield Estate stood transformed, its gardens immaculate, its halls filled with purpose. The morning sun streamed through restored windows as Claire walked the paths. She now knew by heart, checking preparations for the day's ceremony. The memorial plaza was complete at last. At its center stood a new monument, not the grieving angel, though she remained in her place of honor, but a bronze sculpture of a woman holding a child, face turned toward the sun. The inscription read, "For Margaret Bellwether Sterling and the Faw, all who suffered for truth. Justice delays, but does not forget." "Everything ready?" Thomas asked, joining her. He moved slower now at 75, but with the satisfied air of a man who'd lived to see wrong made right. Almost. Lily still fussing with her speech. "She gets that from you," Thomas chuckled, "always wanting everything perfect." Lily, now 14 and tall for her age, had been chosen to speak at the dedication. She'd grown into a thoughtful young woman, her artistic talents channeled into documenting the stories of families helped by the Thornfield Justice Foundation. The ceremony drew dignitaries from across the country. The Prime Minister sent a representative. Historians, journalists, and hundreds of ordinary people whose lives had been touched by Thornfield's revelations filled the grounds. Claire spotted Sophia Sterling, now Sophia Walsh, having taken her mother's maiden name directing volunteers. She'd become the Foundation's leading legal advocate, her insider knowledge invaluable in untangling decades of Sterling deceptions. "Strange to think it all started with a whisper," Sophia said, joining Claire. "One little girl's certainty that someone was waiting to be found. Patricia Wells was there, of course, covering the story that had defined her career. Dr. Thornton, now director of the Thornfield Historical Justice Institute, bustled about ensuring every detail was academically perfect. As the ceremony began, Lily took the podium with the same quiet confidence she'd shown at 9. Her speech was simple, direct, powerful. 5 years ago, I told Mrs. Sterling Aunt Claire that the garden hid a secret. I didn't know then how big that secret was, or how many lives it would change. I just knew someone was sad and waiting, and that felt wrong. She spoke of justice and truth, of the courage to confront family secrets and the power of believing victims. But she ended personally. My great-great-great-grandmother Margaret died trying to protect her daughter. For 100 years, people pretended she never existed, but she did exist. She loved, she hoped, she fought for her child. Now everyone knows her story. The sad lady isn't sad anymore. She's proud. The applause was thunderous. Claire wiped away tears, as did many in the crowd, even some former Sterling family members. There to witness their ancestors' crimes acknowledged, seemed moved. After the speeches, they unveiled the memory wall, a glass installation where families could record their own stories of historical injustice and resolution. The first entry was already etched. Rose Bellwether Hartley, 1924 to 1995. Daughter, mother, grandmother. Robbed of her name, but never her dignity. As the crowd dispersed to explore the memorial and gardens, Claire found herself at the pear tree. It still stood, gnarled and ancient, but somehow vital. New growth sprouted from old wood. Regrets? Thomas asked, joining her. None, Claire said honestly. You? Only that my grandmother didn't live to see this. But then again, he looked around at the transformed estate, the seekers of justice. His granddaughter helping unveil truth. Maybe she does see it. Through us. The foundation's work continued to expand. They'd helped restore property rights to over 100 families, exposed corruption in 3 other major fortunes, and established a template for investigating historical crimes. Law schools taught courses on the Thornfield principles. Museums created exhibits on suppressed histories. But for Claire, the greatest satisfaction came from smaller moments. Lily's acceptance to art school, where she planned to study historical documentation through visual narrative. Thomas's joy in walking grounds his family truly owned. Quiet evenings in the kitchen, the 3 of them sharing meals and memories. As sunset approached, the event wound down. The last visitors departed, leaving only the extended Thornfield family, by blood, choice, and shared purpose. They gathered in the restored rose garden, where Margaret's blush roses bloomed in profusion. What would Margaret think of all this? Lily wondered aloud. I think she'd be amazed, Claire said. Her simple act of hiding truth in the ground grew into all of this. One woman's refusal to let lies win changed hundreds of lives. Thousands, Sophia corrected, joining them. The ripple effects continue. Every family who finds justice because of Thornfield, every corporation held accountable, every whispered secret finally spoken aloud, it all traces back to her. They were quiet for a moment, each lost in thought. Then Lily spoke with her characteristic clarity. She's not waiting anymore. None of them are. They've been found, their stories told, their families restored. The secrets are all in the light now. As if in response, a breeze stirred the roses, carrying their perfume through the garden. Somewhere a blackbird sang its evening song. The old house stood solid and welcoming, no longer haunted by sorrow, but filled with purpose. Come on, Thomas said. Dinner's getting cold. They walked together toward the house, the millionaire who'd found her mission, the groundskeeper who'd reclaimed his heritage, the artist who saw truth where others saw only shadows. An unlikely family forged by justice, bound by love, living in a house built on truth rather than lies. Behind them, the memorial plaza stood ready to welcome tomorrow's visitors, tomorrow's stories, tomorrow's victories over historical wrong. The Thornfield Justice Foundation would continue its work, the ripples spreading ever wider. But tonight was for family, for quiet celebration, for gratitude that sometimes, against all odds, Whispered truths can topple empires. Patient justice can prevail, and sad ladies in gardens can finally rest in peace. The circle was complete. The secret was told. The garden bloomed with new life where old sorrows once lay buried. And in the heart of Thornfield Estate, 3 generations sat down to dinner, their conversation mixing laughter with memory, planning with peace. Margaret Bellwether had planted seeds of truth in desperate hope. A century later, her garden had become a forest of justice, sheltering all who sought refuge from lies. The sad lady whispered no more. Her story was shouted from the rooftops, written in law books, etched in memorial walls. Most importantly, it lived in the hearts of those who'd heard a little girl's whisper and chosen to listen, to believe, to act. At Thornfield, the secrets were all gone. Only truth remained, solid as stone, enduring as love, patient as justice itself. And that truth had set them all free.